We are in a sermon series called The Wilderness, and for like centuries, Christians have done intentional work of preparing themselves for Easter Sunday, well, Good Friday, and then Easter Sunday, in a season called Lent. And so we have been walking with Jesus through his wilderness as we prepare ourselves for the cross. And today we're looking at, in the wilderness, it's a time of doubt, a time of doubt. In 1918, Billy Graham was born. Billy Graham, probably the most well-known evangelist of all time, widely and affectionately known as America's pastor. We all need a pastor nationally, especially in the United States these days, and died actually in 2018. He preached in 185 different countries to 215 million people. They figure 2.2 billion people have heard Billy Graham preach, and estimates say that over 2 million people have given their lives to Jesus Christ because of his ministry. Like the guy's a giant, okay? A giant. In 1956, in the first edition of Christianity Today, which is a publication still active today, which is the publication actually that Billy Graham started, the first edition of Christianity Today. He writes an article in 1956 called Biblical Authority in Evangelism. And here's what he says in Christianity Today's article in 1956. In 1949, I had been having a great many doubts concerning the Bible. I thought I saw apparent contradictions in Scripture, some things I could not reconcile with my restricted concept of God. When I stood up to preach, the authoritative note so characteristic of all great preachers of the past was lacking. Like hundreds of other young seminary students, I was waging the intellectual battle of my life. The outcome could certainly affect my future ministry. A hero of the faith, 1949, just doesn't know how he can grapple with the scriptures. Friends, doubt. This whole thing of doubt is a normal thing. Doubt is uncertainty. We're just not certain of things. We're not certain of the economy. We're not certain of leaders. We're not certain of ourselves. We're not certain of even relationships. And so it's been kind of widely broadcasted the way that I met and married my wife. It was way too quick, all right? I met her in October of 2009. I proposed in December of 2009. That's too fast. Then I moved. I moved everything from Vernon to Coquitlam, and then we were living in like this romantic comedy for 6-7 months. Everything was awesome. Like we would go to premarital counseling, and they would talk about all of these things, and we're like, yeah, we get it. We're in love, right? And so then we're planning a wedding, and so we're going to taste the food. And so July 23rd, 2010, it was wonderful. By the way, I've asked her if I can share this, just so you know. So July 23rd, 2010, we get married at Coquitlam Alliance Church. Beautiful ceremony. Our reception is at Meadow Gardens in Pitt Meadows. It is a hot, beautiful summer day. The reception ends around 4. We had like an afternoon reception. I had arranged a limo to take us from Meadow Gardens in Pitt Meadows to the Hotel Vancouver in downtown for our wedding night, Hubba Hubba. It was gonna be amazing, okay? And so they put us into the limo, and the limo doors close, and the guy takes off to bring us to our wedding night. And guys, it was the most awkward, silent, hour-long limo ride you could ever imagine. Because the minute they close the door, Krista and I are like, what just happened? I don't even know this person. What have we done? And literally, the whole time, we're just kind of like staring at each other in a mass of uncertainty about the biggest decision of someone's life. And we laugh about it now. It wasn't laughable then. And looking back at it, it was the best decision I have ever made. But at the time, guys, I wasn't so sure. It's normal. Doubt is a normal part. Not even that, but when we think about the world, where's God in the middle of this? And so it's easy to doubt. In in the face of Lewy body dementia diagnosis. In the face of loss. And it's just so easy to be like, okay, God is sovereign and good. And then we're like, but really, there's a lot of contrary evidence in my life to affirm that. So what do we do? This is a normal part. So if you're ready and willing and able, I invite you to stand. As we read the scriptures in Mark chapter 9, we're just going to read 3 verses, Mark chapter 9, verse 21, and then we'll go back and do some more work here. It says this, Mark 9:21. Jesus asked the boy's father, how long has he been like this? From childhood, he answered, it has often thrown him into the fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. If you can, said Jesus, everything is possible for one who believes. Immediately, the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. And so, Lord, this is kind of the cry of following you. I believe, and then sometimes I don't. And so I pray that the words of my mouth and meditation of my heart would be pleasing to you. In your name I pray. Amen. We're going to look at 3 big ideas, the cry, the object, and the reality of faith as we look through Mark chapter 9. I want to address, though, as we get into this, I don't have a whole lot of time to do this, but I think it's important. I want to address those people in the room who are like skeptical of Christianity or who are seeking, like in a real honest way. When we talk about things of faith and doubt and rationality, this is like its own sermon series. But I do want to address this a little bit before we move on. Mark Twain famously said, faith is believing in things you know ain't true. Okay? And so in the world, when we talk about faith or belief, especially when it comes to religion, the idea is that faith is believing in things you know ain't true, okay? And so there's this kind of looking down your nose at somebody who is a person of faith because they believe in fairy tales and they believe in fairy gods and it actually doesn't exist. This is a very, very well accessed idea in our world. I wanted to challenge that a little bit. When we think of the word faith in the scriptures, a word used many times, or its cognates used many times in the New Testament, the word in the Greek is the word pistis, P-I-S-T-I-S. And that word actually means trust. It means trust, okay? So when we think of biblical faith, we are not thinking of blind leaps of faith into oblivion, into things we know that ain't true. That's not what we're talking about. When we talk about things of faith or belief, we're talking about what do you trust in? And everybody trusts in something. It's impossible to not trust in anything. We all trust in something to give us our worldviews and our beliefs. There was an op-ed in the New York Times in 2017 written by a guy named Peter Weiner, and he says this, but faith itself, while not the converse of reason, is still distinct from it. So what he's saying is that faith and reason are different. They are different. He wants to acknowledge that. But then he says, if it seems like that's asking too much, that faith and reason are different, if you think leaps of faith are for children rather than adults, that's key. Right? The belief or trust in something is for silly children. He says, consider this. Materialists, rationalists, and atheists, people who say God doesn't exist, it's a fairy in the sky for people who need a crutch in their lives, they say they ultimately place their trust in certain propositions that require faith, trust, belief. To say that truth is only intelligible through reason is itself a statement of faith. Okay? Denying the existence of God is as much a leap of faith is as asserting it. That's really important. In other words, I'm trying to just level the playing field for everybody, that all of us, whether you consider yourself a follower of Jesus, a skeptic or a seeker, we all in our lives have trust structures that we give ourselves to. I want to do some work to set up this text that we just read. It was a little bit cryptic. We only read 3 verses. To do that, what I want to do is I want to bring you to Raphael's painting in 1522. Here is the painting, The Transfiguration from Raphael. He is painting this with Mark chapter 9 in mind. The beginning of Mark chapter 9 is a transfiguration of Jesus. We don't have time to get into it. But the transfiguration of Jesus is basically the unveiling of Jesus' true identity. On a mountain with some of his disciples, he is shown to them as who he actually is. The second member of the Trinity, God incarnate, and his true identity is revealed. And that's what's going on up here, is the transfiguration of this moment of glory as God, who is eternal, becomes human. There is this moment where he is unveiled to his disciples. Now, on the bottom part of Raphael's painting is the scene we just read. And here's what's happening. Here is this boy right here who is convulsing due to demon possession. This is his father who has brought his son to the disciples for exorcism or to be cared for. Okay? And this is the scene of the disciples and the scribes yelling at each other. Okay? Because what's happened is the Father has a deep need for these disciples to cast out demons as Jesus gave them authority to do in Mark chapter 9. The scribes are yelling back and forth about why they can't do it because they don't seem to be effective in this moment, okay? This sets up the scene that we're gonna read right now. Jesus now comes down the mountain from his moment of transfiguration with his disciples and sees this scene of them bickering and arguing together, and here's where we bring it up. Then when they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them and the teachers of the law arguing with them. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. Mark includes that. Think about it. Like they see Jesus and they're overwhelmed with that was a sermon in of itself. It says this, verse 16, what are you arguing with them about, he asked. So Jesus is trying to test what's actually going on. Just then, a man in the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought you my son who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out this spirit, but they could not." This father's faith is shattered. In a moment of need, he brings this boy to the disciples who represent Jesus, and they failed to do what he wanted them to do. Verse 19, "You unbelieving generation," Jesus replied, "how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy." Why is Jesus saying that? Because of the transfiguration. Because just moments before, he was revealed to some of the disciples as who he actually is. And now here he is with his faithless disciples, unable to do the very thing he has given them authority to do. And so Jesus is saying this to his disciples. And the father, his faith is shattered because here he thought that his disciples would be able to help. "Bring the boy to me." So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. I mean, this is like a horrendously horrifying experience. For a little boy to be possessed by an evil being, foaming, convulsing at the mouth. I mean, I can't imagine being an onlooker to this, an innocent little child in this state. And here we see the cry of faith, verse 21 and 22. Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" Here's the thing. Jesus knows that already. But from the beginning of this interaction, you see Jesus entering the pain of the father's story. "Tell me more. How long has he been like this?" "From childhood," he answered. "He has often thrown him into fire or water to kill him." So this has been from the beginning of this little boy's life. There has been something that has been an anti-life thing in his life trying to destroy him. The terror of a parent. I get worried when my kids have a common cold. Imagine the terror of this father. Then he says, "But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." If you can do anything, take pity. So on a very, like, kind of really heavy topic of doubt, we need some like lighter moments, and so I just want to get a little lighter. This word, in the Greek, this is like the word of the day, okay? Splanch nizomai. This is not a fun word to say. Splanchisnomai, right? This is the word in the Greek for pity. And what the Father is saying is take pity on us or have compassion on us. The root word of this Greek word is actually inward parts, okay? And so what this Father is doing, this word, take pity, is to be moved by the most inward part of your being in compassion. And Jesus' question, how long has he been like this? The boy's father is able to tell him the facts since childhood and the need. Take pity on us. Fact and need. Here's what's going on and here's what I need. And this is the moment of the cry of faith, facts and need. This father needs help. Where has he turned? He turned to the disciples, unbelieving generation, faithless. Turn to Jesus. Will you help? Will you move towards me in your compassion? And this father admits his need. This is the cry of faith. I am in need. I'm in need of something. Here's the facts. Here's my need. What are your facts? What is your need? What are your facts? I lost my job. And I need some finances. I got a diagnosis. And I need some hope. I lost a friend. And I need another one. What are your facts? What is your need? And here's the cry of faith that every single human being has facts and has a need. The question is, are you admitting it or are you managing it? That's the question. Are you admitting your need or are you simply managing it? And by managing, I just mean we just close ourselves off from God and we do it ourselves and we try to manage the biggest, most stressful thing that is way above you. In other words, you can't do it. You're not supposed to do it, but yet you try to do it. And maybe that's the reason why you're burnt out and you're tired and you're hopeless, is because you know the facts, you just haven't admitted your need. This is the cry of faith. And this is what we see in the Father. The object of faith. Mark 9:23. So I love this question that the Father asks. I mean, how honest, but if you can, like, it would be great if you could. Like, he's just really, like, your disciples haven't, and so maybe you can't either. If you could do this, that would be really great. And then Jesus quotes him, if you can. He challenges him. He challenges the Father. If you can, said Jesus, everything is possible for one who believes. In other words, this is what I believe Jesus is saying. As regards to your remark about my ability to help your son, I tell you, everything depends upon your ability to believe, not mine to act. In other words, of course I can. That's not the question. The question is, where, Father, are you placing your trust? Where are you placing your trust? What is the trust structure of your life? What is the scaffolding of trust that you place your life, your people, your finances on? Think about that question. We all have a scaffold that we put our stuff on, our health, our people, our friends, we all do. And that's what Jesus is challenging. What is your scaffold of trust in your life, Father? Because what the Father just wants is he just wants a miracle exchange, right? I come to you, you perform the service, I walk away, we're all good. But Jesus is wanting more than that for the Father. You see that? Because Jesus is not just beckoning a miracle exchange. What he wants is relationship with the Father. Because the Father's gonna go on from this point in his life and something else is gonna come. And if all this is a miracle exchange, a service done, no, what's gonna happen is that the trust structure of the Father's life will remain unchanged. If you can, of course, everything is possible for those who believe. All relationships are bound by love. All of them are. It is impossible to be a strict rationalist in relationships because you don't have any scientific proof that the other person's gonna love you back. All of it, in a way, is a leap of faith. It's a trust. Can I mathematically or scientifically prove to you that my wife will never cheat on me? No, I can't, but will she ever cheat on me? No, she won't. Why? I love her, and she loves me. And love beckons trust. And trust in this moment is what Jesus is after. Everything is possible for those who believe. He is challenging the Father as he is challenging you. In your greatest moment of need right now, what is it? Facts and need, what is it? And in that, I think the follow-up is he's saying to you and he's saying to me through Mark chapter 9 in this ancient text to modern ears, what he is saying to you is, do you trust that I am able? That's a big question. Do you trust that I am able to save your son? Do you trust that I am able to heal your cancer or your spouse's cancer? Do you trust that I am able to oversee the affairs of the world with the threat of global recession? Do you trust, right? So when we hear those questions, here's what we are tempted to do. I don't know. I'm not sure. But what I'm gonna do is I am going to scrounge up, I'm gonna white knuckle as much faith as I possibly can. And so I'm gonna say words over and over again and get me all foaming at the mouth. And so I have enough faith. And then, or what we're gonna do is we're gonna say, well, if we get enough people with a little faith, so you have little faith, I have little faith, you have little faith. And what we do is just like a little lemonade stand. We just, and then there's a whole glass of lemonade. And so then we bring that whole glass of lemonade. We have enough faith, Jesus, now you're gonna do it, right? Or what happens is, or you hear, oh, if you have enough faith, then maybe you will be healed. And then you're not healed. And so then you wonder, did I have enough faith? And so then you're in this cul-de-sac of, oh no, did I have enough faith? Maybe I didn't confess enough sin, right? Maybe that's a problem. Or maybe throughout church history, this is what in the worst parts of church history, what they said is, oh, the reason is because you haven't given enough money. So maybe if you give enough money, you'll scrounge up enough faith and then we'll somehow bring the piggy bank to God and say, look at how much faith we have. Would you please act on it? And do you know how much damage has been done to people with that in mind? Oh, if only I had enough faith. If only I'd confessed more. Or if only I had done more. And that's the reason. And so the locus of effectiveness of the healing lands with us and not on him. Wrong. Not at all it. Because what Jesus is beckoning the Father to do is to not scrounge up enough faith to try to convince Jesus to heal his son. What is he wanting? He's wanting him to just simply place his trust in him, to transfer it from whatever trust structure he has onto himself. And so here's the freedom from the cry of faith to the object of your faith. It is not the intensity of your faith that matters. It is the object of it. And who is the object? Jesus. Full of compassion, sovereign and good. That is who we place our trust in. It is not about the intensity, but rather the object of faith. And this, my friends, is freeing for us. And if you don't believe me, just watch the interaction in just a second, because here's what happens. The reality of faith. The Father's response to Jesus If you can, everything is possible for one who believes. If you place your trust in me, look who I am. And then the father says immediately, like right after the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. This is not a poster child for faith. This is not going to be on some calendar you get from some place in the United States who brings out and propagates Christian trinkets to North Americans. This isn't going to be on some sort of calendar where a deer is lapping the water and that phrase is on there. You're not going to get that on some mug. I believe, but I don't. Oh, how freeing. How freeing. This man does not have intense faith. He has honest faith. Really honest, freeing faith. Jesus, if you're asking me what the scaffold of trust is in my life, if you're asking me, you're there, but also other things are too. My wealth, my reputation, my hard work, my success. You're there, so are other things. I do believe, but I also don't. Oh, this has been balm to my soul this week. It's not about the intensity, but the object. So this is honest. He's asked to express radical faith on behalf of his son. You would think if there's any moment where you are going to have the utmost faith, it's going to be on behalf of your son. He can't even get there. He can't. But he recognizes that unbelief is the natural human experience. It is natural to doubt. Natural. See, in this moment, he realizes, and this is what I think Mark is doing in a really interesting way. What Mark is showing is that this father is more like the disciples who didn't have enough faith to do the job he wanted them to do than he realized. He's more like the disciples, faithless. He just says, my faith is far from perfect. So this is honest. This is real. And Jesus is just saying, do you believe? Do you trust that I am able? And I think this is normal. It's a normative part of our experience, of affirmation. I do believe, Jesus. But honestly, there's other things that I'm just not sure of. And so I think this just like clears the deck for us to bring our whole selves to Jesus, both the places of trust and faith and belief and beauty and the questions we have that we have no idea. It's not one or the other. It's not saying I believe, but then kind of hiding your doubt. And it's not just saying, oh, no, Jesus doesn't care. No. He has compassion. He is able. We feel the tension of this. This was one of my favorite quotes when I was studying this week in a commentary. True faith is always aware of how small and inadequate it is. Yeah. Yes, it is. The father becomes a believer not when he amasses a sufficient quantum or energy of faith, but when he risks everything on what little faith he has, when he yields his insufficiency to the true sufficiency of Jesus. That's real faith, of bringing whatever we have and putting it before Jesus. See, the father's fragile and insufficient faith placed on the right person did get the outcome. I want you to read the story for yourself this week. The son is healed. In other words, that's the amount of faith that you need. No more and no less. It worked. It worked. The boy was healed. I want to leave you with a few things before we come to the table. So how do you deal with this doubt you have? I want to say very clearly, I'm married to somebody who just has always believed and is a rock. And so that may be some of you here today. Like it's just always been there for you. It has not been a struggle. The way that I connect often with Jesus is through my mind. And so for me, I grapple with things. I have question after question after question after question for Jesus in my journals. Well, what about this? And so do I doubt as a pastor? No, I work through it. But do I have questions? Oh, absolutely I do. But my questions, instead of bringing estrangement from Jesus, bring me closer in wonder. That one day my faith will be made sight. And I will know. But now I don't. And so I hold them. I often ask God, why are you so hidden? I struggle with that question. As people have struggled throughout Christian history with that same question. Why are you hidden? You seem hidden to me sometimes. Why? So how do you deal with it? So for those of you, my point was this. For those of you who don't doubt, great, wonderful. But for those of you who do, here's a few things. That was a really long way to say that. Honestly, have you talked with God about it? Have you talked with God about your doubt? Oftentimes, I will unleash my world to my mentors, and one of them will say after I unleash all of these things and my questions and my world, the good, the bad, the ugly, and then he'll just say one simple question: have you talked to Jesus about this yet? And often I'll be like, no. It's like that's probably what you should do. In other words, work it through. Your stuff, your fact, and your need. Work it through with Jesus. Bring it to him. The Psalms, read Psalm 13. It starts by saying, how long, O Lord? How long, O Lord? You can work it through. Number 2, intentionally. What are your true motivations? We all have motivations behind our questions. You understand that? There's an honest question and then there's a dishonest question. Oftentimes, I think we bring our loaded and packed questions to Jesus with motivations to disprove him rather than wait for an answer. Do you see the difference? And that is very important as we deal with our doubt. Communally, do other people know? Do other people know about these things? Man, I want us to be a community where we can walk with each other in times of uncertainty and doubt, where we're not really sure what God is up to, and that is okay. We're not Bible verse slingers at each other. If only you'd believed, whammy, here's a Bible verse, and here, whammy, here's another. Look, I believe the scriptures. Please, let's use it for everything, faith and practice, but we can just actually hold it together without having to make yourself feel more comfortable with that person's doubt. Okay? Just hold it with them. This is huge, communally. Diagnostically, are there other core and competing commitments that you are holding to? As a pastor, I've done some work through my schooling recently on deconstruction, a deconstruction of faith. And what I've learned is I think there are legitimate things to doubt, but I think there's often more competing commitments going on in someone's life that are actually energizing your doubt. Okay? So this is not original work from me. This is somebody who was working through their own doubt, and they said, sure, it could be, my doubt could be, yes, maybe that God isn't real, or maybe God isn't good. But then he said, oh, hold on, but here's other commitments in my life that is probably clouding my perspective. And so here's some core and competing commitments, maybe with your doubt, that you need to be honest about. Number 1, I'm going through a very difficult time alone. That's actually just true, and so that's energizing. I've expected things from the Christian faith that it never promised, that you wouldn't suffer. So that's true. God allowed suffering in my life, and I've never reconciled with him on that. That's a place that I've expected I love this one. I've expected a periodic bowl of Sunday morning faith to sustain me for the other 6.85 days, immersed in a culture that disagrees and is even hostile to my faith. Okay, that's true. I love the approval of others, and I'm bummed that many others disapprove of my faith or specific tenets of my faith. Like really what you're holding to is your reputation, and that's the problem. Okay? The Christian God of the Bible exists, but I've defined God as I want him to be rather than the God who he declares himself to be. Return on investment issues in my relationship with Christ. I love this one. I've expected a great return on a minimal investment. Like in your doubt, are you opening the scriptures? Or if you have never read your Bible in your entire life, and then you're trying to dismantle it, that may be a problem. I've isolated myself. I've allowed destructive habits to make a nest in my life. Do you have a secret porn habit that you've never told anybody about? That's probably being a veil between you and God. I'm just saying. I'm spending lots of time shouting about the speck of sawdust in the eyes of others instead of inviting Jesus to deal with the 2 or 3 pine trees growing out of my own. I've got a grudge with somebody and it's stifling my love for God and others. Are you living in forgiveness? I'm not distinguishing Jesus from the bad behavior of those who claim to be his followers, an enormous one. Diagnosing. My Christian parents did some silly things, don't we all? So I jettisoned their way of doing things, their diet, their politics, their way of being married or not married, their way of raising kids, their culture, their town, their faith, or the ways they practice their faith. So much of deconstruction has to do with that. I've added things to my life: college, new friends; grad school, new friends; work, a car, some enemies, new hobbies, new gadgets, more stuff, more hours of work to pay for more stuff, a spouse, a house, new friends, a baby, another baby, a second job. But I stuck with the stubborn allotment of 24 days, 7 days a week. Like maybe one of the reasons why you're not close to Jesus is because you are traveling to your kids' tournaments 51 weeks a year. I'm just saying. Okay? So I think in the midst of this, you have to diagnose, is there more going on? And then finally, sacramentally, we come here. Have you brought your doubt to this table? The sacrament, this is it. This is the place of heaven meeting earth. This is the Eucharist, the Lord's Supper of invitation. Have you brought your doubt to Golgotha, the place of suffering of Jesus? Have you looked at the cross and stared at it until you saw its glory? Have you pondered the depth of love of Jesus Christ bleeding out, tortured, dying for you? And as you look at the cross with Jesus on it, you see the perfect one suffering for you. The one who is innocent without sin dies for you, a sinner, made in the image of God, but a sinner. You hear him. Have you brought your doubt to the cross where you hear Jesus say, God, why have you forsaken me? Like if there's any faith that can hold your doubt, it's Christianity, because it's Jesus who is asking the Father, why have you forsaken me? Why is the world like this? As he is dying, have you brought your doubt to Jesus who's asking these questions? Have you brought your doubt to Golgotha to smell the stench of death on Jesus? The great enemy of all of humanity is the very thing that Jesus goes through. And as you see, as you hear, as you smell, do you know that it was for you? With all of the facts and all of the need, my friends, bring it here to this table where Jesus dies for you. So much of our doubt stems from injustice. God, this is unjust. Why? Look at the cross. Look at the cross. It stands as a pillar of injustice in a dark and cruel world.